Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all. As you can imagine, foreign policy issues have dominated the conversations that we've had and will continue to dominate in this European Council. The points I made on behalf of the European Parliament started with the rapidly evolving and deteriorating situation in the Middle East that echoing what the Prime Minister said, entering the Council continues to be of great concern. Hamas's terror attacks against innocent civilians have cast a dark shadow upon the region, and the bitter truth is that their vile actions have likely set back any prospects for peace by years or even decades. The European Parliament has aimed ever since the beginning of this attack on the 7th of October to show that it is possible to have a unified position in taking a strong stance against Hamas's terror and making every effort to alleviate the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. These two actions are not mutually exclusive. We have brought together different political, national and ideological positions and adopted a resolution last week with a very broad majority. Innocent lives must be protected, hostages must be freed and aid must get across. This is why the Parliament has called for Hamas to be stopped, for a humanitarian pause, and why we welcome the tripling of humanitarian aid. I am confident that today's meeting will result in an equally strong and united message. Now, while the events in the Middle East remain on top of our concerns, we cannot in any way divert our attention away from the other geopolitical instabilities in our neighborhood. There are maybe more than ever before at one time. One head of state and government said that we're no longer in a situation where we can talk about frozen conflicts anymore. Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues to ravage, and we cannot allow our support to waver, not even for 1 minute, because that is exactly what Putin is hoping for. So, providing that conditions are met, the European Parliament expects that accession negotiations with both Moldova and Ukraine can start already this year, and that when that happens, we cannot be found wanting. For Ukraine, we also need to find an agreement on the new funding for its recovery and reconstruction. That is why we voted on the proposed 50 billion Ukraine facility at our session last week, because our message wanted to be as clear as possible, that as a union we have shown extraordinary unity when it comes to Ukraine, and we need to continue to work for this to continue. This brings me to the issue of our budget. I've said this before, but allow me to repeat it. We need to be able to back our words with finances. We urgently need an agreement on the revision of the EU's long-term budget. As it stands, our resources are stretched to the limits. The adoption of the MFF when it took place was at a time when the world was drastically different to the time that we are living in today. Our priorities have evolved and our debts are increasing. When we talk about our priorities, we need to make sure that they are adequately funded, whether, as we all agree on the need to address security and migration, to continue to support Ukraine on a long-term sustainable path, to support member states struck, as we saw so many instances this year, by natural disasters, to repay our debts and to prove that all our talk about our increasing our competitiveness is not only empty words. So now, and this was a message that I communicated at the European Council, is the time to put our money where our mouth is, because it really is the European Union's credibility at stake. I spent the last part of my exchange on migration. First of all, I referred to the cases of recent events and the increase in arrivals of asylum seekers. which have once again demonstrated the consequence of our current fragmented and dysfunctional policy on migration and asylum. The clock is running down. We have to make progress on all the components of the Migration Pact, including on closing the loopholes between a negative asylum decision and a return decision. This we need to make sure that we can deliver both an agreement on migration before the end of our mandate. This is the one outstanding legislative issue and one where we committed to in 2019 that we would address without knowing everything the European Union would face or the world would face in the past 4 years. The situation has deteriorated, not improved. It is overdue, and we have no choice but to go to the 2024 elections in just over a bit more than 6 months from now with a proper European answer. Because there's one thing that our citizens understand is that this is not something that can be resolved or addressed at the national level, but rather at the European level. So I'll leave it at this and happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you very much, President. Questions then? Christian, tu peux t'approcher au micro, s'il te plaît.
Could you come to the microphone, please?
Oui, bonjour. Vous avez insisté sur l'unité de l'Union européenne. Or, aujourd'hui, avec ce sommet, sur les 3 thèmes que vous avez abordés, on voit la désunion. Vous êtes félicité aujourd'hui dans la famille PPE du retour de la Pologne dans la famille et dans la famille des pro-européens, mais au même moment, on vient de récupérer une Slovaquie qui est anti-européenne, pro-russe et anti-ukrainienne. Alors, vous aviez dit avant de venir que vous alliez aborder le cas de Viktor Orban, qui est allé serrer la main de Vladimir Poutine sans que personne ne s'en offusque ici. Est-ce que vous avez soulevé ce problème? Est-ce que vous croyez encore aujourd'hui que l'Union peut fonctionner avec des dysfonctionnements parmi ses États membres qui se foutent complètement des valeurs de l'Union européenne? Merci.
Merci. Vous m'avez demandé si je dois croire. Sinon, on ne peut pas avoir une conversation, de répondre aux notre citoyens qui ont trouvé pendant la pandémie, maintenant pendant des guerres, qu'il n'y a pas de solution qu'on peut les trouver au niveau national, mais au niveau européen. C'est pour ça que je parle beaucoup sur l'unité. On l'a trouvé, cette unité, dans le Parlement. Nous avons trouvé plus que 500 voix en faveur d'une condamnation sur les atrocités et en même temps la demande pour une pause humanitaire. Et il y avait beaucoup de premiers ministres aujourd'hui qui ont dit qu'on peut, si on a trouvé la majorité au Parlement européen, on peut la trouver aussi dans le Conseil. Alors, sur les pays spécifiques que vous avez mentionnés, sur la Pologne, oui, hier, j'ai rencontré et aussi aujourd'hui Donald Tusk, ancien président du Conseil européen, mais aussi ancien Premier ministre de la Pologne. On doit voir qu'est-ce qu'ils seront les résultats des négociations. Il y a encore du temps pour voir, mais on a vu que le peuple de la Pologne, le jeune, aussi avec les résultats qui ont démontré que même s'il y avait, c'était une campagne très active et très intense, il y avait un turnout historique. Et ça, c'est une chose qu'on a vue aussi parce que la situation de l'Europe, la discussion sur l'Europe, était centrale pendant la campagne électorale. Sur les autres pays, j'ai rencontré juste à ce moment le Premier ministre Fico. C'était ma première rencontre. C'était juste de lui dire un bienvenue au Conseil et après on va voir qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire, mais sur ça, je dois aussi, sur la position de l'Hongrie, rappeler qu'on a eu, depuis presque 2 ans, de l'unanimité au Conseil. Et je dois de répondre comme j'ai définir comme j'ai commencé, de dire qu'on doit continuer à croire dans cette unanimité parce que nous n'avons pas le choix sur l'Ukraine, sur la relation, notre relation internationale et la condamnation de ce que la Russie fait.
Question suivante. Yes, madam, please.
Guten Tag, mein Name ist Ala Schali vom Rodau Nachrichtensender. Ich spreche Deutsch. Frau Präsidentin, für mich ist es wichtig zu wissen, heute heißt es, gemeinsame Linie haben ist wichtig für die EU-Länder. Meinen Sie, das schaffen wir heute, wo ganz genau wir wissen, dass Israel plant, eine Bodenoffensive zu starten? Wie will Europa verhindern, dass dieser Konflikt in der Region nicht ausbreitet? Zweite Frage wäre, Migrationskrise ist ein Thema, Flüchtlingskrise ist ein wichtiges Thema. Viele Länder sind überfordert. Was denken Sie, wie kann man das Problem lösen? Also worüber werden Sie als Präsident des Europäischen Parlaments die Länder unterstützen, dass man das beschränkt oder überhaupt das Problem lösen kann?
Which countries? Did you refer European countries or non-European countries?
Wir haben viele Flüchtlinge aus dem Irak. Irak ist kein sicheres Land. Viele sind auch jetzt, werden abgeschoben. Deutschland und andere Länder, Italien, sind auch überfordert mit den Flüchtlingskrise. Wie will EU das überhaupt lösen? Das Problem? Dankeschön.
Okay, thank you very much. So, if we can focus on what I think can unite the member states, first of all, in saying it clearly, that Hamas is a terrorist organization. It does not represent the legitimate aspirations or aims of the Palestinian people. In fact, they hinder them, which is why we demand the unconditional release of all more than 200 hostages, and that how Israel reacts matters, which is the thing that I said when I was in Israel 5 days after the attack, that the humanitarian consequences need to be alleviated, which is why we welcomed the tripling of humanitarian aid. We continue to hope that there will be more channels for aid to flow in, that there would be the protection of innocent civilians, and that, as you said, this was also mentioned by a number of prime ministers, that we talk to the countries in the region, whether that is Egypt, whether it's Jordan, Lebanon, Greece, and Cyprus actually mentioned this specifically because of their proximity, also historical ties, but also the leverage that they have in order to speak to the countries in the region in order for the protection to flow, the protection to be given, the aid to flow, but also to ensure that there is no, let's say, sympathy movements between terrorist groups and their satellites in each of these countries. This is important, and I think that when we draw a line as to what could bring the member states together, this would be the basis, and that's what we would expect from today's European Council. On migration, you mentioned Iraq specifically, but I wanted, and I asked you about the countries because, first of all, we still need to work for a common list of safe third countries. When we talk about countries of origin and countries of transit, that we have too much still of a silo mentality between us dealing with migration, us dealing with development, with trade, and countries in our neighborhood who tell us that you only talk to us when it's about migration and not when it's about investment, partnership, development, help. That is where the external dimension of the so-called Migration and Asylum Pact comes to the fore. It is an essential part of what we do because, as you said, when you talk, if you talk only as EU27, the discussion will only focus on how quickly can I reintroduce my internal border rather than what are we doing to uniformly secure external borders. And secondly, how can we make sure that the asylum, in other words, the solidarity pillar, is balanced with the return and security pillar. I would say that because finally, after almost a decade of deadlock, we have moved. Still a lot of work left, but everything is proceeding. On returns, I would hope for a vote before the end of the year in one of our committees, the Civil Liberties Committee. Whereas on the other files in the package, we are in trialogues and all the rapporteurs have reported significant progress. From the Parliament's point of view, we met the targets. In other words, we brought the legislative report to the table. We are around that table. And I look forward to the fact that the closer we get to elections, we recognize that time is running out if we think we can go before our citizens and tell them that all of you, and here I would put all the countries who have placed migration at the top of your concerns will remain without an answer because we couldn't find one. That's not something that we can accept as a parliament, and it's not one where we as an institution will be found wanting.
Next question, Laura.
Laura.
Hi, Laura Zornoza for EFE. So on the MFF revision, what's the meeting point between a parliament that's demanding 10 billion euro more and prime ministers that are saying that there should be one priority, Ukraine, and not priorities in plural, and that there shouldn't be new contributions, but rather using old funds that haven't been used? What can be the meeting point there? Thank you.
Yeah, you could have asked this question just without the Ukraine 10 years ago, and we would still be in this, let's say, natural, traditional dilemma in the European Union, right? Where you have those member states who come to the table by saying spend no more. Others who say let's be creative. Others who say let's only go with the adoption of the Ukraine package, which is mostly in loans and less in grants, but which would, if rolled out, essentially mean that Ukraine can benefit from 1 billion euros a month. In other words, that is a specific need that could be met. There are other member states who are saying that if it will only be Ukraine, then we cannot accept, because we cannot justify to our citizens that when we are hit with a natural disaster, and we look to the use of the Solidarity Fund, and the response that we get is that that fund has run out, or that you touch what we look at as fundamental programs of the European Union, and you can leave the common agricultural policy aside, but even go towards Horizon, Erasmus, programs that feature very heavily because of their success in each pro-European campaign, especially as we look to quite a difficult election period ahead. We absolutely cannot tell our citizens that on the one hand we're willing not to spend anymore, but at the same time we cannot find a solution to pay because our we have, let's say, we are overextended in terms of our debt. So this is all to say that I don't see a way out yet. We will have to see the outcome. This will be discussed quite late tonight between the member states. We will then need to be prepared first for a first round. This is in terms of Parliament, the budget 2024, of conciliation between the Parliament and the Council, which will start on the 13th of November, and then which will end on the 13th of November, and then we either go to a second conciliation round, and then we would still not have in the December European Council, which should be the enlargement European Council, if you will, which would not have a solution on the budget. So I think that there would be willingness even before that to try to find a solution. And once again, I'm hoping, also because prime ministers have said this, that that at least some middle ground can be found.
Yes, madam, please.
Like that? Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you, Mrs. President. My first question, if I may, regarding this European Council that is very important, if not very crucial, regarding the Israel-Gaza conflict, and also, like you mentioned, the migration that's hot topic, sorry. Do you plan to address these two topics together, anticipating in the future, request of asylum when it comes to the refugees that's going to outcome from this war, given also the fact that more than 140 million people are already displaced, according to the UNHCR? Or are you going to, address these two topics separately and see, because you mentioned that 6 months deadline. And the second question regards the trip of President Macron, who went on trip to Israel, Palestine, Jordan, and Egypt, and he called for an international coalition to fight against Hamas. How does the European Parliament welcome this proposition? Thank you.
So on the second question, that is in relation to the concern that you could have solidarity being shown between different terrorist organizations in the Middle East, and one that I think will need us to be extremely clear that terrorism is terrorism, full stop, and we need to fight that, and Hamas and organizations such as Hamas must be stopped. I take those comments in that context. On whether we would, let's say, bring in the potential migration aspect to what is currently happening in the Middle East, that is, I would say, already on the table. It has already been referred to by a number of prime ministers. Also, if there is a spillover, we need to think of the refugees, let's say Syrian refugees in Lebanon, etc. So this is a reality that could take us back to a situation where 2015 showed us what could happen in such scenarios. It would not be linked specifically to the Migration Pact, that is a specific legislative package, but if you also think about how we have dealt with migration over the past 4 years, first with the hybrid migration flows coming from Belarus into Poland and the Baltic states, that is a specific new phenomenon, similarly through the Western Balkans, and now with the cases of the increased arrivals coming in from the Mediterranean into the southern parts of Europe, such as we saw in Lampedusa. So we would tackle that also, keeping in mind the decisions that we took to activate for the first time the Temporary Protection Directive, which we did for 7 million Ukrainian refugees. But that link has not yet been made, and I don't think it will be made, that we will look at each and every case and see how we can address it. But as I said earlier, we meet every European Council. If you had asked me what I would have thought on any of this in Granada just a little bit more than 2 weeks ago, I would have wondered what next. And it really is a case of us having met today and said to each other, yeah, what will be next? It's a very, very difficult moment. It's very heavy.
There was still one question, I think. Yes, you, please.
Rostislav Demchuk, United News of Ukraine. Mrs. President, I would like to ask you about, I don't know if it's a question exactly for you, but the question about the obstacles which does Hungary. So today would be the very important topic concerning Ukraine. It says financial support, humanitarian support, energetic support, and military support, etc. And also probably decision about the starting of official negotiations of accession of Ukraine to EU. As we know, that the sympathy of Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, is very high towards Mr. Putin, and he now openly supports Russia in a war against Ukraine, and also block all the initiatives you provide. So how it's possible to come out from this sleeping corner? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I can answer you from a perspective of the European Parliament that all the issues you mentioned and the speed with which we adopted the report on the 50 billion Ukraine facility was precisely destined to make sure that we would leave the door completely open for this decision to go through the Council. We did it early. We combined it with the multi-annual financial framework because we understand that the review would also need to bring this into account, but also because we understand the urgency and the needs of Ukraine. I talk with your leaders on a daily basis, and you can be reassured that the Parliament will not dither, and we will continue. Now, with regards to the specificities here, I continue to hope that the unanimity that was found in the past can still be found. And that means that we work, that's the task of myself and all my colleagues, with those countries that still are asking questions, or some countries that are going in the seemingly opposite path. And that is, let's say, something we will need to factor in, and I'm hoping that we will be able to overcome. And this will relate to many things, whether we are talking about the final, I keep hoping, I say this every European Council, acceptance of Romania and Bulgaria to the Schengen area, how we proceed with each of the countries in the Western Balkans, and how we proceed with Russia and Ukraine. At the end of the day, what we have always said is that if the conditions are met, if the criteria are fulfilled, if a country such as Ukraine, because you are from there, have shown such remarkable progress, then how can we not match that, especially in a situation where you are fighting not only for your own security, but for the whole of Europe's. There is a specific, of course, let's say, geopolitical context that we're working in. And there was also an appeal by some of the prime ministers to keep that in mind for over the next weeks when these decisions need to be taken. So I wouldn't, let's say, give up or lose hope. And I would continue to urge for that unity to be found again. I think we will manage.
And the last question, the last row, please. Yes.
Hello, thanks for taking my question. Suneva Rose from The National. I just wanted to ask you about a letter that was signed by 76 MEPs today from different political groups. It was sent to Mrs. von der Leyen, Mr. Michel, Mr. Borrell. It's calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, restrictions on the delivery of fuel to be lifted, and the delivery of aid to not be limited to South Gaza. I'd like to know what your response is. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So I'm aware of the letter. There is a position of the Parliament that was adopted last week with over 500 votes in favour. And that is the position that I'm bound by, and that is where we call for a humanitarian pause, condemnation of the Hamas atrocities, for the protection of civilians, for a two-state solution. Let's say, my appeal would be not to underestimate the difficulty that was, how difficult and sensitive it was to adopt that, but we did. And we would call for other institutions to look at that language, and in fact, a number of leaders actually did in their speeches. Now, however, on delivery of aid and more routes, and the fact that there should be every effort made to increase, because it's clear that what is going in now is not enough. And as you said, it can not only reach only a part of Gaza. That was already a position that was in the resolution last week, and it is a position that I'm sure will find a majority of the Parliament behind.
Merci beaucoup. Bonne soirée.